So I figured I would be making this video sooner or later. Ever since Motortrend released the dyno numbers for their 2020 Corvette C8, the internet has been abuzz. And it's really no shock that that has been the case, as Motortrend dropped the bombshell news that the Corvette C8 that they put on their dyno made over 650 horsepower and over 600 pound-feet of torque at the crank throughout their extensive testing. Now, I did say this in my last video, and I'm going to say it again. The moment that I read that, I knew something was up. I love the Corvette C8 dearly. I truly think that GM has substantially stepped up their game with this car. But the fact is that those numbers just didn't make sense to me. How was a 495 horsepower at the crank SAE certified engine making over 550 horsepower to the wheels? I mean, I've heard of companies undercutting their power a bit, but come on, let's get real. While the LT2 is reworked, it's still a naturally aspirated 6.2 liter V8 that we all know. So of course I questioned this and mentioned it in my last video. Well, it hasn't taken long, but I would say that we have some really great information that backs up that the dyno results we received from Motortrend are incorrect. Many of you are most likely familiar with Jason Camisa from his stint at Motortrend, and he has since moved on for reasons that I'm not going to discuss in today's video, but I will say he is highly regarded in the automotive journalism field, and he really does know his stuff. So Jason stepped up the plate to give us his thoughts on why the dyno numbers we received from Motortrend are wrong. Let's jump into what he has to say and break down his argument. Jason starts his article by saying that everyone makes mistakes. He highlights that his guess is that the dyno operator made some sort of mistake when setting up the dyno's computer. As I mentioned in my last video, the dynamometer, or dyno for short, can be manipulated based on the mathematical setup that you give it. So one car can give several different readings from different dynos. Not saying dyno figures shouldn't be used at all, it just means that we have to take some dyno numbers' accuracy with a grain of salt. Jason then does add that he feels that Motortrend did make a mistake in posting their article. He is effectively saying that they should have known better. While it sounds great that the new mid-engine Corvette performs off the charts, in reality it only sets it up for unrealistic expectations that are not accurate. So moving on from there, Jason actually begins his argument by throwing out some of the numbers that Motortrend has given us, the 0 to 60 in 2.8 seconds that they achieved, along with the 11.1 second quarter mile at 121 miles per hour. These numbers have also been recreated by other publication companies. Now, I do want to throw in that the quarter mile was one of the biggest red flags for me, and I mentioned it in my last video. A car making this type of power that Motortrend said with a dual clutch transmission should be trapping at a far higher number than what was given, and I would guess that it should be under an 11-second quarter mile with ease. So that just didn't jive with what we were seeing. And I think Jason agreed, saying that the almost second quicker 0 to 60 runs is spectacular, but it really comes down to better grip in the gearing of the 8-speed transmission, not so much the power figures. Jason then used a simulator to run the potential outcome of the C8 by using many different known metrics and mathematically calculating the theoretical acceleration and top speed for the Corvette C8. Since his program didn't have an LT2, he did use the LT1, and he noted that while it is rated for less power than the LT2, it is very similar, and it shouldn't make that much of a difference if the car is running so much stronger than the performance-wise that we're given. The LT1 should not match up with the performance times that was given by Motortrend. Jason used the C8's gear ratio, actual curb weight, tire size, and even the estimated drag coefficient for the car. The program then spit out some calculations, and it showed what Jason and many of us thought. The LT1, with the better grip and gearing, it had very similar numbers in times to the LT2. So to test against this, Jason put in the dyno numbers given from Motortrend of 558 wheel horsepower and 515 pound-feet of torque, and the quarter mile dropped to a 10.3 second quarter at 134 miles per hour. That right there is a huge validation in the argument against what Motortrend has posted. I do want to say that these numbers that Jason has provided should excite you all, because the first thing that comes to my mind is that it is entirely possible that the Z06 version of this platform could make that power or even more out of the new 5.5 liter flat plane crank V8. I mean, come on, the Lamborghini Huracan Performante runs the quarter mile in 10.2 seconds. So even just a bit more power out of the Z06 and we're there. For a bit of perspective, the ultra powerful ZR1 is capable of a 10.8 second quarter mile. That's the best time anybody got out of its stock. Truly goes to show you the value of going mid-engine. Jason then says the nail in the coffin against the dyno number is something called BMEP, or brake mean effective pressure. Essentially, BMEP is the pressure of torque per unit displacement, or torque equivalent to a specific power. His reference for this is giving horsepower per liter. The power an engine makes relies on two things: its ability to spin quickly and its ability to produce tons of torque at those revs. Specific power outputs vary tremendously between engines, but BMEP does not, especially when looking at computer-optimized modern engines. Jason then gives us a chart of 6 different examples of vehicles and their displacement, peak torque, then their BMEP number, and I'm going to throw them up on the video now. As you can see, the vehicles on the chart range from a Toyota Corolla to an 812 Superfast. They also have a huge range of both displacement and peak torque. Nevertheless, you will notice that the BMEP of all the vehicles fall within a fairly small window, from 12 bar on the Corolla up to 13.9 bar from the powerful 812 Superfast in its 6.5 liter V12. If you take Motortrend's highest dyno number from the day, which was 640 pound-feet of torque at the crank, it would give the C8 a BMEP number of 17.7, a number that's just not even possible out of an engine like this. The only engines that make that type of BMEP are turbocharged engines. It adds to their BMEP numbers. An example given was the Mercedes-AMG C63 and its 4.0 liter twin turbocharged V8. It peaks out at a 20.5 BMEP number. So I would say at this point we know that while it sounded great, the dyno numbers Motortrend has given us are just invalid. Motor One did reach out to GM regarding this, and their comment back was as follows: "We have spoken with Motortrend about its dyno testing of the 2020 Corvette Stingray. We cannot be sure what procedures were followed during its testing, as we were not present during nor informed about the dyno test until after it was performed. The vehicle we provided was completely representative of the cars we will be providing to customers. GM follows a strict protocol on certifying engines' power ratings, and we stand by our Society of Automotive Engineers certification of the output of the Stingray's LT2 engine." So that's absolutely telling us that GM is standing behind the SAE numbers that they were given, and that essentially they've given it to all of their customers. And personally, I have to say, I'm perfectly fine with the fact that the Corvette C8's true dyno numbers are lower than what Motortrend has given us. Honestly, this car has accomplished so much, and you have to remember we're only seeing the base car here. Chevrolet is pushing further by adding a brand new engine and most likely a wider body and more tread to their higher performance models. But if we take a step back and just realize that for $65,000 you can have a Z51 Corvette that does 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds easy. I mean, what a time to be alive. If you say that just isn't good enough, then honestly there's probably nothing that ever is going to be. But as I always do, I want to hear from you all. What are your thoughts on the new mid-engine Corvette, and do you think that the argument from Jason Cammisa holds up? The last thing I want to add is that while I feel this does tarnish a bit of the reputation for Motortrend, it shouldn't be a reason to completely write off the publisher fully. They do provide some great insight on brand new vehicles, and many of their journalists do a fantastic job. With that being said, the Corvette C8 was put head-to-head against the Porsche 911, and while the Porsche does what it always has and provides its customers an incredible car, it was finally defeated by the Corvette C8. Now, don't think this article was all love for the C8, as Motortrend did deduct on several of the weaker spots of the car, those being the transmission, which can be improved through updates, and the understeer, which is actually good for the average driver. But even with the faults of the Corvette C8, it still came out on top against one of the toughest foes out there. You have to respect the 911, so this article shows you just how special the new mid-engine Corvette truly is. I hope you enjoyed today's video and the analysis that Jason has been able to provide us. If you did, hit that like button, as it truly helps to support me and my channel. If you're new to the channel and you like what you saw, think about joining our community by subscribing. Thank you all so much, and as always, take care. I'll see you next video.